appreciate you inviting me, Mike. It's been a really good 3 days. This is a lot better than February in Washington State. It's not 40 degrees and it's not raining, so I appreciate it. Only one correction, actually. There is no board to the National Council of Clubs. I'm the spokesperson for the National Council of Clubs. There is no board. I want to tell you a story of the potential and the potential power of a unified grassroots motorcycle rights movement. I personally experienced it, and I watched something happen in Washington State that I never thought would happen. I'm a second-generation member of the Outsiders Motorcycle Club. I've been in this community my entire life, and so I've experienced and watched patch holders experience profiling and discrimination for over 40 years. It's just a condition of our culture. It's a condition of the way that we're defined, and it has not yet outlived its usefulness in terms of entertainment media and the news media. We're vilified, but things are starting to change. Before 2009, I'm sure our experience in Washington State is like the experience in most other states. There's an epidemic of motorcycle profiling and discrimination incidents. How many people have spent time on the side of the road for no other reason than the fact that they're a patch holder? Even though traffic infraction might be used, the majority of us spent time on the side of the road because they think that we're criminals, because they think that the entire culture exists for criminal activity. And it's not true. We all know that's not true, but that's how we're defined, and that's what we're dealing with, and that's why it happens. Previous to 2009, barely a week could go by without a member of my club and most every other club in Washington State where at least one of their members wasn't spending a substantial amount of time on the side of the road. They use a traffic infraction to justify it, but you end up being there for 45 minutes to an hour for no other reason than them wanting to conduct an investigation stop, right? How many times during one of these events or one of these incidents did you not receive a ticket? In Washington State, one of the things that we found out is at least half or more of the time when you're pulled over for a traffic infraction, you're not given a ticket. And the reason you're not given a ticket is that's not really the reason they pulled you over. They use the traffic infraction as a pretext to investigate you, to take pictures of you, to interact with you and ask questions to you about your club. They justify it by saying there's probable cause for a traffic infraction, and that meets the minimum standard of the Fourth Amendment, but the true reason is they want to investigate you. This happened at an epidemic level previous to 2009. For the first time in our state, we were able to get more than a dozen people to the Capitol on our day at the Capitol. Everybody has one, and we generally would get a dozen to 15 people there. And although they were activists and they cared about motorcycle rights, 12 people are not going to magnify the voice of the entire community. They're going to be looked at as a dozen people. And although they might be courteous to you, you're not going to get what you want. You don't have significant manpower with a dozen people. So in 2009, we decided in our state we needed to make a concerted effort, even though everybody didn't party with each other, everybody didn't spend a great deal of time together, we all decided that we were going to unify for the purpose of protecting our rights base. Regardless of our personal social relationships, we all have a lot more in common than differences, especially when it comes to how we're treated and targeted by law enforcement. So we showed up in 2009 with 100 people. And for the state of Washington, that was significant. That's less people than you have gathered here, but 100 patch holders showing up to the Capitol was important for us. That was the first year we attempted to get a bill sponsored for many years. While we were in an office with a senator attempting to get a sponsor for the profiling bill, a significant event occurred, something that was very important that would lead to success 2 years later happened. The first piece of our pattern of evidence, is what I'll call it, was happening in the parking lot while we were attempting to get a sponsor. Someone who was watching the motorcycles caught on his cell phone camera a video of a state patrol officer crawling through the bushes in the parking lot of the Capitol, writing all the identifying information down about every single motorcycle in the parking lot. Ironically enough, the bike they started with was mine. I don't know if that was random, but they wrote the information down on every motorcycle in the parking lot while we were attempting to get a sponsor. That video became very important. It taught us two things. The first thing that taught us was the power of video and how persuasive it could be. Because if you show a legislator, particularly the one we were attempting to get a sponsor from, that it was happening in the parking lot while we were attempting to get that sponsorship, they suddenly understand it. We were able to say things like, "Profiling has followed us to the steps of the Capitol." That's a pretty powerful phrase. And that phrase was repeated over and over. It also taught us that we can't just go to the Capitol and say, look, we're discriminated against in profile. That happens all the time. I could bring everybody here to tell a story about discrimination and profiling, but that's only an anecdotal story. What the legislators want is very similar to what they want in a court of law. They want solidified evidence. They want something that not only makes the statement that profiling is occurring, but they want the proof. Being able to see it in a video is that proof. We learned something from that year, and we came back in 2010, the next year, equipped with a better pattern of evidence and 300 people instead of 100. We were able to get one sponsor on the bill in 2010. He was my representative. His name's Steve Kirby, and he said, I'm going to take a chance and sponsor this bill. I don't want you to get overexcited and think that it's going to pass. I'm not sure that it will work, but you know what? I'll have your back and I'll sponsor the bill. It's basically going to be up to you. So we got our foot in the door. We were able to get a hearing for the first time in 2010, and during this hearing something happened that had never happened before. We presented our pattern of evidence, we presented the video, and what happened is they execed it out of committee right during the hearing. Anybody who's involved in legislation, anybody who lobbies knows that that's an extremely rare event, that your bill actually gets execed out of committee during the hearing. But that's what happened to us the first year. It passed our House of Representatives 96-2 in 2010, and a big part of the reason is they are now aware that it was an issue. And we showed up with a visible constituency, 300 people. Doesn't sound like a major amount, but it was enough for them to pay attention to us. We didn't have enough time in 2010. We had a short session. We weren't able to pass it through the Senate. But in 2011, we had so much momentum that we were able to pass it through both the House and the Senate unanimously without a single no vote in any committee or on the floor of either chamber. This bill went into law in 2011, unanimously approved by our legislature. And that's a pretty amazing statement. That doesn't happen a lot, and it especially does not happen a lot with bills that deal with motorcycle discrimination. It's basically unheard of. But you know what? I don't think it's an anomaly, because we took this process, and one of the things that I've been driven to do since this bill passed in 2011 is go on trips like this to different states and say, this is something that's achievable. With the amount of people that gathered here, you could pass the same law in Nevada with this mobilized constituency. If we could get everybody to the Leatherneck on a Saturday afternoon and sit in the sun and listen to 5 speakers, then definitely there should be enough motivation to get this many people to the Capitol to magnify the voices of the people who are representing you. You could change the law with the amount of people that you have sitting here. You have more people here than we did in Washington State. I'm looking at 2 people who are sitting here who traveled out for a meeting we had. Motorcycle Riders Foundation, if you don't know, for the first time is going to support the agenda of a federal motorcycle profiling bill, a bill that fights motorcycle profiling at the federal level. Last year in Maryland, they have been longtime members of Maryland Debate, and I'm talking about the Holcombs, Lenny and Shelley Holcomb. They're sitting in the front. We traveled out to Maryland, and they were about in the same place we were, I would say, in 2009. They had the community unified and they wanted to do something, but it was the first time they were going to attempt to pass a profiling bill as well. In 1 year's time, that first session, using the same process and the same pattern of evidence and virtually the identical process we used in Washington State, they were able to unanimously pass it through their House of Representatives, or their Senate rather, last year unanimously without a single no vote. The same thing that happened to us in Washington. They too ran out of time and weren't able to pass it through their whole legislature. But this year, they have over 60 sponsors for their bill. It's cross-filed in the House and the Senate, and the chair in each of those committees is a primary sponsor on the bill. Maryland's going to be the second state in the union, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say with a certain amount of certainty, I believe it's going to be the second state in the union that passes a law that addresses the issue of motorcycle profiling. The dominoes are going to start falling, right? 2 days ago in Oklahoma, a bill that's identical to the one that passed in Washington State passed their Senate unanimously. You have one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast, and a pretty conservative state in the Midwest that are all equally embracing this issue because it's becoming something that everybody recognizes as legitimate. So the process works. So it's probably pretty important to talk about what that process is and exactly how we did it. There's 3 broad things that you have to do as a community. The very first thing I believe that you have to do before you can be successful like these other states that are being successful is to unify your community. And that means 2 things. The first thing that means is the clubs need to unify. One of the things that's happening for the first time in 30 years since the helmet debates in the late 60s and 70s is motorcycle clubs are starting to become involved in the legislative movement again. We could talk to the Holcombs and they could tell us for the last 30 years they've been showing up with those dozen debate members keeping our movement alive. And now, for a number of reasons, motorcycle clubs are starting to become involved in the legislative process again. That gives us a unique opportunity because we have more manpower in our community that exists anywhere else in the motorcycle rights movement. Because when clubs decide they're going to show up somewhere, we show up. Independents may or may not show up. Clubs will show up. That's one of the best things that we can provide for the movement. So the first step in the process is clubs have to unify, at least to the point where they agree that we have more in common in terms of our civil liberties and our rights space than we have differences. And that's the issue we need to unify around, you know? That's why at our COCs and our political events, we ask that no one discusses any internal club business, because that's not what this is about. What this is about is our unified political rights space. So that's what we need to be focused on, and we can all agree that we have that in common. And as long as we can come together at events like this or events at the Capitol and have our focus be the rights that we're all attempting to obtain, then we can move forward and we can do it in a peaceful way. And that's happened in all of these different states. The other part of unification, which was really important for us, and I think it's really important part of the movement, is that you have to reach across the aisle and extend an olive branch to the independents in your state. In many cases, these independents stayed at the Capitol since the late 60s and early 70s. They paid their dues and they know the system very well. So there's a practical reason to unify with the independents because they understand the legislature better than most patch holders do. But the other essential reason why I think it's important to unify with with independents is there's a lot of legislators that ride motorcycles, right? Every legislator that rides a motorcycle is an independent. So they identify with independents because that's what they are. And when they realize that people in debate and people in other independent motorcycle organizations are victims of discrimination and profiling as well, then they start to identify a lot more with the entire movement. And they don't look at us just as motorcycle clubs or outlaw motorcycle clubs or however else they want to define us. We start becoming defined as the motorcycle rights community. And that's what we need. And the only way that's going to happen, in my opinion, is if the club community reaches out and unifies with the independent community. And there's a little bit of growing pains when it first happens, but I'm telling you, in every place that it's happened are the states that are successfully passing laws. And so it's really important. Unify with your independents. Once the club community and the independent community is unified, then the next step is you need to be prepared. There has to be preparation. You don't want to bring 300 or 500 or 1,000 people to your Capitol if you haven't done your homework, if you haven't done what I consider to be the most important part of the process, is to establish your pattern of evidence. You can't show up at the Capitol and say, look, we're profiled, everybody could tell you the story. You have to prove it to them. So the best ways to prove it to them are methods that have already been best practices. First is video. We should all know that video is extremely persuasive. One of the reasons why there's a lot more scrutiny on law enforcement that operates outside the bounds of legal behavior is because a lot of these incidents are now being caught on video and camera. Almost everyone has a cell phone, and so it makes it extremely easy, or a lot easier than it used to be, to capture these images and these stories. Like I said, the first thing that happened in 2009 when we started to learn this was catching a state patrol officer crawling through the bushes and catching that on video. That video is extremely important. So video is important. Always keep video, cameras at the ready, and always be ready to videotape any incident. Another good way to obtain video and other critical information, and probably one of the things that we use the most, is what's called public information requests. Freedom of Information Act requests at the federal level, and every state has a public records request law, where you can request essential documents from government agencies as a source of accountability to your government, right? As a source of accountability to the citizenry. So we use public information requests on every single profiling stop that occurs. And some of the things that you get back are the dash cam video, the CAD report, any radio transmissions that occur, anything that's important. And I'll tell you how important it is. In Maryland, we had the Maryland State Police say, we don't profile anybody. It doesn't happen. And if you can prove that we profile, then we will not oppose your bill. So, we, in collaboration, when I say we, the COC in collaboration with the debate, issued a public information request on an incident that happened at a run called Ocean City, where they pulled over 100 patch holders over on a huge profiling stop without any individualized probable cause. The day before we had the hearing last year in Maryland, we analyzed this video in the public disclosure request, and what's the first thing that we saw once these 100 motorcycles pulled in? Someone with a Maryland State Police jacket walking right across the video, right? They were honorable to their word and they didn't oppose the bill. And that was one of the major reasons that it passed unanimously. When the law enforcement community does not stand in opposition to the bill because you can prove that they're violating your constitutional rights base, it takes a lot of power away from them, even in front of the legislature. One of the legislature's primary responsibilities is to manage the relationship between law enforcement and the citizenry, the community. That's one of their primary jobs. They control the budgets, and they also dictate laws of accountability. Right now, accountability is one of the biggest issues in society. Accountability with law enforcement, not just with our community, but with every other community. So, if you spend the time that it takes, and you're judicious enough to establish a credible pattern of evidence by using public information requests and video and communicating with one another about these things when they do happen, then you're ready to take the last step. Once you're unified, once you're prepared, once you have an established pattern of evidence, then it's important to take action. Taking action is just a commitment that everybody in the community has to make to themselves and to everybody else, that if we're going to participate in this movement, when we need to show up, we'll show up. You can have an excellent public speaker, right? Someone who can represent the arguments and the perspective of our community quite well. But even if that person shows up and articulates a great argument for why you should pass a law, if they don't have hundreds of people behind them, their voice is not magnified. It's not heard nearly to the degree that it's heard when there's hundreds of people behind you in a hearing room. When you pack a hearing room, wall to wall, with nothing but patch holders, believe me, they recognize that. They recognize that and think that there's a lot more people that were there than actually were. I was talking to Lynn, he told me a story. They have an event in the Beltway, the MRF does every year, where they go to Washington, D.C. and they lobby. There was 130 people that showed up, and they were all motorcyclists, dressed like motorcyclists. The next week, when the MRF lobbyist was walking around the halls, he was hearing people say, man, did you see there were 1,000 bikers here last week? 1,000 of them. They'll multiply it by 10 for you. Every individual that shows up, you hear different statistics, either counts for 10, 100, 1,000 votes, but every individual that takes their time to show up to the Capitol represents more than just that individual voice. They represent an entire population of people. And what do these people want more than anything else? They want to be reelected. And so when they know that there's hundreds of people who are their direct constituents, who are willing to take the time out of their day and their busy lives and all show up at the Capitol together, they pay attention to that. In Maryland, in 2 years' time, once the independent community and the motorcycle community unified, in 2 years' time, it is far and away the most visible lobbying constituency in the state of Maryland. And it only took a couple of years. That's important. A lot of people will tell you the laws take years and years to pass, that they're very, very difficult, and sometimes they are. Sometimes, especially at the federal level, they do take years to pass. But the one thing about state legislatures, including yours, is they're working legislatures, which means when they're not in session, these people live in our neighborhoods and work in our communities. They are us. So if you can reach out and identify with them, they'll identify with you. Every state that has passed significant legislation in the last 3 years, in the last 5 years, has followed the same format. They've unified their community, clubs and independents. Then they prepared themselves and didn't walk into the legislature with just anecdotal stories. They walked in with solidified video, solidified proof that profiling was occurring. And then the last thing that they did is they all showed up when they needed to show up. When there was a hearing in Washington, over 100 people showed up to fill every one of those hearing rooms up. We could do that in less than 24 hours. The only way you can do that in less than 24 hours is if you're all unified and communicating. Everybody has to show up at the same time. In Maryland, they were able to get their community, over 100 people there, and coordinated buses to give them rides in. These things are all very noticeable, but if your community can make that commitment, you can get this done. An individual that I met in Maryland, someone I have a lot of respect for. He's in a motorcycle club called the Legion MC. He's my friend. His name's Colt. I met him in Maryland. You know, this guy's amazing, a diamond in the rough. Didn't know him 2 years ago, and he quite honestly is one of the most impressive lobbyists that I've met. But one of the things that we did about 6 months ago, once I met this guy, is we wanted to be able to take this message, not just these conversations that we have, not just traveling and talking to people, but we wanted to create something that provided the tangible processes and tools to actually help people get something done. So we started something called the Motorcycle Profiling Project, motorcycleprofilingproject.com, and it does two things. The original intent of the Motorcycle Profiling Project was to provide the tools and information that other states requested to help them do the same thing. We can prepare a 50-page legislative packet for you. We've done a lot of the research. We can help you put together your pattern evidence. We can help you put together all the material and all the strategic knowledge that we've gained from these different states in the last few years, and we can tailor that specific to the state of Nevada, or specific to the state of Oklahoma, or any other state. And we can provide that information for you. It's a service, it's free, it doesn't cost money, it's for the community. The other thing that we started to do, which was also the conception of Colt, he's bright, so he saw the importance of it, is we started to write movement-created media. We started to understand that the perceptions of our community is created by the media, very similar to the things Will was discussing. And so what we decided to do is create our own media source. And we have such a huge grassroots community that the Motorcycle Profiling Project has grown to the point where we're actually able to infiltrate, or at least get some penetration into local, and the last couple of weeks, national media. And that's really important because that's the only way we're going to change people's perceptions. So, this is what I'm doing. Until there's a federal law that stops motorcycle profiling and discrimination, or until every state in the union passes a law to stop motorcycle profiling and discrimination, this is what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to spend my time helping the community that I grew up in, the only community I know. My father's community, my family's community, my friend's community. So if you guys want to do this, I'll definitely help you. Every step of the way. Colt will help you. The Holcombs will help you. The people who've done it. If you guys decide this is what you want to do, let's pass a motorcycle profiling law in Nevada. I'll be around if you have any questions. You want to, oh, you know what? Actually, give me one more minute, Mike. Started this motorcycle profiling project. A lot of attorneys have reached out to me. You know attorneys, they see opportunity. And so one of the things that I decided is that I'm not going to be exploited. If they want something, they're going to have to give us something back, right? So met an attorney in California, been working with him, been writing some blogs for him. He's really interested in getting involved in the motorcycle rights movement. And one of the things that they prepared is actually a really, really valuable tool. How often do you get asked questions at debate or in the COC about what should we do about club trademarks? What should we do about making our club an official entity? What should we do about motorcycle profiling? What will we do if someone gets fired from their job because they're a patch holder? So what they've designed and made look really nice, done it very professional, is what I'll call one sheets on all of these legal issues. So here's one on motorcycle profiling. What it does is explains what motorcycle profiling is, explains the laws that are being passed and why they're effective, and explains what you can do if you're a victim of profiling and how you can document that event and turn it into a pattern of evidence. There's another one on equal access. You ever been denied from a public establishment because you're wearing patches? It's important that you understand what equal access laws are. There's a difference between a private owner of a public establishment like this and an agent of the government acting under the color of state law. Those are very different things. These one sheets explain legal issues and different ways and different tools that you can use to combat these. It's a really, really valuable tool. In one folder, pretty much the majority of legal issues that we deal with in the community are explained and analyzed, and it's a really good tool for everyone. There's a box of them. He sent me 300 of them. They're free. They're down here afterwards. Oh, I guess they're up front. Where are they at? Oh, center table. So, for sure, every individual, grab one. Don't just grab one for your club. Every individual should have one. As many of these that, we can distribute, so knowledge is power. And the more knowledgeable we are, remember how, I'm going to dovetail it, remember how this whole conversation today started about your responsibility, our responsibility as motorcyclists to know what our rights are. We need to educate ourselves because they're not going to educate us. This is just another one of those tools that will help us do that. So again, man, I've had a great time in Vegas. I appreciate everybody being so welcome and hospitable, and now we can do that. All right, thanks.
All right, hey, thanks. Round of applause for Double D and everything he brings. I was just asked by a couple gentlemen here. I want to take just a quick second to, we're going to recognize all the people we've lost this year in the motorcycle community. We've lost quite a bit. We're here in the middle of Chinatown right now. Be careful. Don't assume anyone's going to stop at a light, anybody's going to freaking not turn in front of you. Don't let them take you away. So we have that responsibility in this town. You get outside of Vegas, go do whatever, do it right 110 miles an hour, you do whatever the fuck you want. But be careful, okay? Because people are not looking out for us. They don't care about us. They don't look out for us. You're on a cell phone. They're on their cell phones all the time. So we got to be careful. So let's recognize all the lost riders that we've had this year, and you know, we pay them respects because they're our brothers too. Is there a Ronald Sims here in the audience? Ronald Sims. Anybody know Ronald Sims? I don't know the road name. I dropped a ticket inside the bar, so give it a Stubbs. Yeah. Hey, you guys, thanks a lot. I want to thank Ghost. I want to thank the Leatherneck. I want to thank the Silver Shields. They did all the security across the street for all of our bikes, all of our cars all day today. They came in. They were here at 9:30 in the morning. They worked all day. I want to thank them a lot. The Marine Riders work security in the parking lot. We really appreciate that. It's a lot easier for them to take care of someone than it is us or a 1% Club or something like that. So we appreciate that. We appreciate all the hard work. Ghost really stepped up to the plate. I had a really good day. I hope everybody else did too.
Thank you all for being here. We greatly appreciate it, and God love our country.